Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes the best things in life come expectedly, and sometimes the funniest podcasts are the ones that get planned the night before that they actually go on. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a fun, quick little week 3 of the NFL season Sunday preview by a former host of the Bunsen Bruises podcast and the man who, still owns all the rights and entities and assets to the Bunsen Bruises franchise himself. Myself, Iceman Jurg, joining the man, the myth, the legend himself, the baseball don, the golf godfather, as I called him last night on a separate thing. My guy, James Marcia. James, how we doing? It's been a little bit since we hopped on a pod. I'm very excited now.
Oh, we're doing good, Jared. Been having the itch the last couple of times I've been on podcasts, so I figured why not? Let's do a Sunday preview, and then hopefully we start rolling into something here again. Maybe the return of B&B. Who knows? We'll see. We'll
Maybe.
see.
Like a real quick bars, like a phoenix coming out of the ashes. We will be revived. We don't know how many times it's been at this point, but there can be a revival.
Hey! Nothing can stop B&B. Okay, it is. It's what's the Einstein thing? Energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only whatever.
Something like that.
I clearly failed that class, but either way, Jared.
I didn't take physics, so
I didn't even make it a physics. But I'm excited, Jared. It's NFL Sunday. Weather might not be that great, but hey, light up a candle, throw on a hoodie, and then just do nothing but watch Red Zone all day. So that's why we're here. We're here to break down the games for the people, give them a nice little preview of just what's happening today and tomorrow, and then let's see if maybe we hit some highlights here, Jared. Maybe we have some hot takes that are proven right. Or maybe people learn a little something extra right before the games kick off today,
Yeah. Hey, we are here to educate and spit our opinions. And, well, one of those things for sure will happen. The other one, we'll see.
But like I said, Jared, we're here to preview the weekend. So, before we preview the weekend, let's talk about the first game that happened. Unfortunately, it was my New York Giants getting the life beat out of them by the San Francisco 49ers. They covered, by the way. I know the spread was -10. They covered that easily. To be honest, Jared, real quick, just to get into it, as a Giants fan, they played harder than I expected. They were close the entire first half, I'd say. The game was kind of not in our hands, but in our reach. And we kind of just shot ourselves in the foot. There were plenty of times where it was 19 missed tackles, I believe. That's insane. Yeah. It should never happen ever in an NFL team. Aside from that, plenty of times we were third and long or just third in general in the red zone, and penalties were shooting ourselves in the foot, handing them and giving them another 4 set of tries to get it into the end zone. So other than that, man, it's disappointing because you knew it was going to happen. It's like when your girlfriend breaks up with you, she's going to start dating other guys. But when you see that picture, it still hurts a little bit, But other than that, this team needs to go back to the fundamentals. You don't know what's going on here. Missed tackles, penalties. It was the Giants last year. They made sure to not make mistakes. They let the other teams make mistakes. And that's the only reason they stood in games is because they made little mistakes or no mistakes at all. When you make this many mistakes, as I said, we were close to them. We were playing way better than people expected us to do. But overall, kept shooting ourselves in the foot, and 49ers showed why they were the better team last night. Well, Thursday night.
Thursday night, indeed. Yeah, no, that game kind of went the way I expected it to. You kind of figured the Giants were going to try to come out with energy early on because they have the loss of Saquon Barkley that they have to deal with for what we think is a little bit of time. People are trying to report that maybe he's going to try to fast track his way to be ready for the Giants next game, which I think you're facing the Seahawks, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct, but that'd be the worst decision he could possibly do.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be shocked if the Giants are trying to fast track it, but if I'm Saquon, I'm taking an extra week or two to make sure I'm right. But you kind of figured that early on the Giants were going to try to be quick and effective if possible, try to get San Francisco surprised, like, oh, they got a little bit more fight than we thought. But eventually, especially in the second half, the 49ers really dug into things. They let their defense do their work. They let their skill position guys do their thing. I think Brendan Ayuk missed the game, but Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey were more than enough to be able to do it. And the man himself, big clock Purdy, Brock the Clock. I don't know. I forget my nickname that I said for him. But ultimately, Brock Purdy, the man himself, stays undefeated in the regular season, bars. That's the funny part. He is undefeated still in the regular season. Just the one playoff loss that he has on his resume. But San Fran just continuing to show why they are the class of the NFC early on this season yet again. Continuing to show why they were in the NFC Championship game the last couple of seasons. we don't expect anything less from a team like that with the Super Bowl aspirations they do. I will say from the Giants' perspective, I'm not gonna lie, I've been a little bit hard on the Giants to start this season, in part because I predicted them to be the 7th seed for the wild card. So guys, please don't fail me. It was the Giants or Minnesota. I picked the Giants because I don't pick frauds. But at the same time, like with the Giants, it's just one of those cases where I had to, like, I'm kind of sticking with a take I had during the offseason, which I think I know there's the whole thing, oh, the guaranteed money ain't that much, but like the Daniel Jones conversation is something that you and I have definitely had plenty of talk about. And I think not last night, geez, now I'm doing it. Did Daniel Jones, did he equate or did he surpass his interception total from last season already? He at least equaled it. I don't know if
he's definitely equaled it. I don't think he's passed it yet. But I mean, it's not Daniel Jones, realistically. He doesn't have time to throw. I'm not trying to make excuses for Daniel Jones. I don't think he'll ever be a top 5 quarterback, as I said plenty of times. There's no reason, though, he can't be as good as Kirk Cousins. And Kirk Cousins is not a bad quarterback whatsoever. He has more mobility than Kirk Cousins. You throw Daniel Jones. I've heard this all over the radio. You throw Daniel Jones on the 49ers, that 49ers team would have beat the Giants down like 60-0, essentially. Because he is much more talented than Brock Purdy, who, as you said, has gone undefeated in the regular season. But, you know, it's really – you mentioned that Seahawks game next week. That's essentially – we're back to that Arizona game. If we lose that game, Jurg, I think that's the rest of the season. Sorry for your 7th seed pick. I don't think that's happening, but I was expecting some slightly higher aspirations. I did think we were going to take a step back this year. Not a major step back like it's looking like, but I thought you were going to see, hey, we're not as good as we looked last year due to the fact that all the NFC teams, they're just a tier above us. We didn't get enough talent in the offseason to take that extra step. So I'm hoping we win next week, because if we don't win next week, we got a gauntlet of games ahead of us after that. We got Miami, we got Buffalo. It doesn't get easier at all. So if we don't win next week, I think that's the season, and we'd be lucky to see 5 wins. I'm thinking 3 to 4 is more like it if we don't win next week, because you can't point to the schedule and say there's teams we could beat if we can't beat the Seahawks.
Right, and especially looking past the next couple of weeks, like you got to face the Eagles twice this season. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to deal with Dallas again. And I know Daniel Jones has a good career record against them, but the Commanders have started out the season 2-0. And if there's one thing we can at least say about the Commanders that we have seen, they can score a little bit. And Eric Bieniemy has Sam Howell looking not too bad, so it'll be interesting to me. I think ultimately, Bars, like for me with the Giants, I kind of said this, I want to say it was maybe yesterday with a couple of friends of mine on another podcast, where it's like the Giants went through an offseason where in the margins, but it wasn't enough to collectively take this team to another level like other teams. Because I also said this about the Bears, where the Bears made a lot of additions during the offseason, but we're talking about a team that was trying to jump up from 3 wins last year to 6 or 7 this year. Like you made additions yet, but like it's kind of easy to make additions when you're starting from a low spot. So like that's what I could say. It has been a disappointing season for the Giants. You just got, I think I've said this a lot, especially for myself, who's one of the 2 teams I root for was a very much a losing team for the last couple of years. Like you just hope for development. You just hope to see like good execution with stuff. If you're a Giants fan, even if the season does become lost, you just hope that at least Daniel Jones is able to gain more confidence and like put on better performances on a more consistent basis, and hope that like the offensive line, sans Andrew Thomas, he always does his thing, but the rest of the offensive line can get it together.
I think that's really what's annoying fans more than anything, Jer. We're not seeing that developmental step we thought we'd see this year. If, we were still competing and we weren't making as many mistakes as we were making, I think fans would be a lot happier, even with, let's say, we lost that Cardinals game as well. We went 0-3. I think fans wouldn't have minded the 0-3 if we didn't look as bad as we currently do. But I do have some breaking news about a player we're going to talk about later. Well, not a player, but we're going to talk about his team. They're a highlighted game for us. But the Chargers cornerback, J.C. Jackson, just signed a 5-year, $82.5 million contract, is a healthy and active today versus the Vikings. That hurts a lot. You know what, Joe? We were going to save it for the end, but I think we got to talk about that now with that news coming in. So let's go ahead, dive right into it. We said the highlight game of today for us was San Diego Chargers. Look at me. Los Angeles Chargers versus the what you call fraud Minnesota Vikings. Both teams are coming into this going 0-2. Some would say this is essentially a season decider for both teams. It's not a must-win, but it sure as hell is a can't lose. Because if you go 0-3, say goodbye to your chances in the playoffs. What do you think? You made that side, Jared. So what's your immediate reactions hearing that news?
Massive disappointment, and as people can see on the bottom ticker that is on the screen now, this is, as what I've personally called it the last couple of days, the fraud off between these two teams. Who's the bigger fraud going into the season? It's just disappointing because J.C. Jackson was the coveted defensive player from not this past free agency, but the year before it. And the Chargers get him, and you think to yourself, okay, you got J.C. Jackson. You draft Asante Samuel Jr., you have Derwin James, who he's had some injury issues as well, but he looked great. Like, he was healthy last season, and he's looked great this season. And like you said, defensive leader, defensive captain on that team. You have Joey Bosa. You make the trade for Khalil Mack. You have, 5 all-pro caliber players on your defensive side of the ball, plus a pretty good linebacker in Kenneth Murray in his own right, plus a very good, defensive tackle, not going to put up the flashy numbers, but he's one of those guys that, fills in your defensive line in Sebastian Joseph Day. This is a Chargers team that, and with Brendan Staley as the head coach, funny enough, the first ever podcast we did together, Bars, we talked about his hiring.
We thought he was great.
It turns out maybe not so much. And the disappointing thing, it's part J.C. Jackson and part the entirety of the Chargers. Mm-hmm. That defense has severely underperformed for the last little bit of time. But especially if you look at the last 4 games, they have given up at least 27 points, because the Titans only got 27, not 28, which is not a surprise because Ryan Tannehill. But the Chargers defense has given up at least 27 points. So basically at least 4 touchdowns or more worth of scores in the last 4 games they've played. The regular season finale last year against the Broncos, they gave up over 30. The playoff game against Jacksonville, we know what happened there, that utter collapse. They gave up over 30 at the end. They gave up 36, I think it was, in the regular season opener here a couple weeks back against Miami. And now you give up 27 points against the Titans team that you had dead to rights. You were up 11-0 in that game. They had leads in 3 different instances, and they still lost that game. It's just an overall disappointment when it comes to the Chargers. And I don't know how hot take we want to get with this, but I think I've already said, I think at the end of the season, if they not even just miss the playoffs, I think if they don't win another playoff game this season, I think Tom Telesco and Brendan Staley are out of jobs. I really do.
See, I don't see how they can have win a playoff game, and I think they get fired, to be honest, sure. Because it's just, you think of teams who have lost unbelievable comeback games. It's literally these 2 teams. And as of late, it's been more the Chargers than the Vikings. Because at least the Vikings have a few of those comebacks themselves from last season. This Chargers team has just been wildly, just unimpressive. It's just insane. And it's every year. I feel like for the last 3 years going into the season, everyone's holding the Chargers up to this high standards, saying they're going to be a Super Bowl contender. How could they not be? Justin Herbert, and all the people you just named on defense. As we've said, this defense, in my opinion, has underperformed for the last 5 years because they've had talent consistently for the last 5 years, and they can't kind of keep adding to it. It gets even more and more, but it never does anything. But aside from that, it's just the last 3 years, it's insane. I'm at a loss for words because it makes you even question, where would we be right now if they never fired Anthony Lynn? Which I thought that hiring was a great firing, to be honest. At the moment now, I'm like, wow, we took a huge step back. You can't consider Herbert one of these top 4 guys. And I'm starting to think Trevor Lawrence is better than Herbert at the moment because just the coaching is holding him back so much. You see the talent. It's there. He could be up there with the Mahomes-Burrow category, but it's in the air of question at the moment. Hopefully he doesn't get messed up from, all these changes in offense and scheme and eventually just gets to your head, as everyone knows. That's Sam Darnold.
It can get to you. And I think one of the things that the Chargers kind of need to realize for themselves is that you need to accept the fact that things have happened and you just need to work from there. Like the Brendan Staley press conference after their loss against the Titans, when he was so very defiant about the fact that the Jacksonville Jaguars loss isn't still hanging on them. That's a complete lie, because up until this season, the Super Bowl loss was still hanging on the Atlanta Falcons organization. You saw how many games they were still losing in the fourth quarter last season. And you mentioned, Bars, the last 3 seasons, just in the Brendan Staley tenure alone, I mean, we could even go further back when we talk about Chargers coaches, but just in the Brendan Staley tenure, they have lost in nearly every single way you could imagine. Last second touchdown, They've lost like that. Last second field goal. They've lost like that. Failed 4th and down conversion. They've lost like that. Call a timeout for no reason when you could have had a tie game and made the playoffs a couple of years ago. You lost like that. Put your starters out in the final of the regular season, even though you already have the playoff spot, and get your guys hurt. And you lost that game. Like every single possible way that something could have gone wrong has gone wrong. And I know like people like, you know what I'm talking about, like make memes about like other teams like the Vikings, like the Cowboys and guys like that. It's the Chargers that have been the biggest thing of that. You know, the funny thing about this, Bars, I actually like this was like a moment of realization I had over the last decade. Like, let's go back to like the 2013 season. I'm pretty sure the Houston Texans and the Arizona Cardinals have more playoff wins than the Chargers. Look where those two teams are right now. Look at where those two teams have been.
Texans definitely do. That's the insane part, man. You got to question. Is it a coaching thing at this point? Is it a manager thing? It's feeling more and more. I mean, everyone knows the rumors that the Chargers owners aren't great owners whatsoever. It's feeling like, though, it does systematically stem from them because where else? If you've had all these changes in coaches, all these changes in GMs, you know, how many times is it just until it's like, hey, it's our fault. We suck at this, you know? Like, you can't fire the owner, but philosophically, they got to start changing something because Brandon Staley was brought here as a defensive coordinator of the LA Rams. They look ridiculous. That was one of the best defenses we ever seen. Granted, you had Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald. It's easy to make any defense look great. I think they had Von Miller that year too. So it's very easy to make defensive schemes work out. But at the same time, you would think with all the talent that we just named on the Chargers, he would have been able to scheme something up there or at least not be able to, you know, at least have an assistant coach to tell you how to manage the game a little bit or something. There's something missing here that Brandon Staley just isn't getting, and it's why he's not going to be a job at the end of this year.
Yeah, and you mentioned like we like you said, we can't do anything about the owners, sans there being a Dan Snyder controversy that somehow comes out. Which would we really be surprised with the Spanos family? But they're dealing with their own infighting right now. Like I think this is one of those cases where you can very much point to management because Tom Telesco, I mentioned the last decade for the Chargers. Tom Telesco's been the GM for the last decade. Yeah. So I think he held on to Mike McCoy for a little bit and then fired him. Then he had Anthony Lynn, and now Brandon Staley. There might be one more coach in there, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was an interim coach. But at the end of the day, like, how often do GMs get this guy got a third head coach, basically. How often do you get a fourth head coach? Like, there have been ample opportunities for the Chargers to do things. And, like, we're talking about a guy who he's drafted relatively well, if people want to, and I myself have, like, criticized GMs of it as well, where it's like, how often do they hit with their later round picks? Like, that's something we could like have up for debate. But like, you just talk about first round picks solely. Mike Williams, it took a little bit, but he's become a pretty good wide receiver. Again,
he was a bust for a second.
He was, but he took the Devontae Adams path of, wait, I have hands, let me catch. Because remember, little thing that a lot of people forget, Devontae Adams rookie season, awful. Let's be real here.
It was not good.
The guy who's become top 2 wide receiver in the game today, top 3, awful rookie season. But he developed and became so good. That same thing with Mike Williams. Asante Samuel Jr., I think maybe late first, early second round pick, whatever he was, phenomenal pick with him. Like, they've had good selections. Even this past draft, like, they haven't found a way to use him yet. But Quentin Johnston could be a really good wide receiver. He has the metrics. He has the talent. Like, this is, on paper, another good selection. You've had so many good draft choices. You've had so much money put in free agency. You have the franchise quarterback. This is the thing. When you're talking about Herbert before, Bars, at the end of the day, if we just take the results away, if we just speak strictly on talent, arm talent, a little bit of mobility, just pure potential and talent, Justin Herbert is a top 6, top 7 quarterback, definitively. He very much is in that conversation. But then you start to add everything else, and that's what, like, it chips away at the guy. Kind of the same thing. It's funny. This is the second straight quarterback they're doing this with Phillip Rivers, because Phillip Rivers is a guy that if the Chargers just had a little bit better luck, maybe we would think of his career a lot more fondly than what we do. But we just think of him as the guy that, this is what I say when I think of Phillip Rivers, Bars. It's like, dang, that dude had to deal with Tom Brady and Peyton Manning for a decade.
Yeah, it just wasn't a great draw for him. But, I mean, at the same time, Phillip Rivers would have killed to have the amount of talent that this Los Angeles team has, and especially the defense. He's had some great defenses, but he never had defense with this amount of talent on this. There's stars on this team. Literally, there's like 5 stars I can count right now on the one hand. And you went through it. And aside from that, it's this line it's a very underrated line, to be honest.
Yeah.
Rashawn Slater at left tackle, he's been holding it down. Phenomenal. Let me tell you, Giants screwed that up completely. But as you said, you have the QB. He could have none of this talent. There's no excuse when you have that QB. So
you got to figure it out as an organization.
Exactly.
When you have the quarterback, you got to figure it out. Like we mentioned with Justin Herbert, I said this before. All but like 7 teams in the league. I'm just doing that off the dome. Maybe if we count it, it might be like 7-6. All but like 6-7 teams in this league would take Justin Herbert on their roster in a heartbeat.
Probably less than that. Let's see.
It's like you have the quarterback, and when you have the quarterback, this is where you're supposed to strike. You have the most important. We always say quarterback, the most important position on the football field. You have the ability to build around that, and you screwed it up. You don't have a playoff win with him, and you only have 1 playoff appearance. That's not good. It's just not good.
Not great at all. But speaking of only 1 playoff appearance and a win, let's look at the other side of the ball really quick over there in Minnesota, because I know you're cooking up. Some people would argue they don't have the quarterback. I'm a Kurt Cochains fan, He seems like he gets the job done. I'll tell you that much. It ain't pretty, but he puts on his Hardman cap and he gets to work, clocks in, clocks out. And he might not be prime time, but is it a Kurt thing, or is it the entire team isn't a prime time thing? Who knows? But he doesn't have the same amount of talent aside from the best wide receiver in the league. And now it looks like the second best wide receiver in the league they just drafted with Jordan Addison. But he's missing the run game. He doesn't have the running back. Their line is questionable. It's certainly not great. And that defense is just couldn't stop a nosebleed, without a doubt. So what's your opinion on this? I know you were cooking it up for a minute. What's your opinion on this Minnesota fraud Vikings team?
I was saying this last season when this team so I forget the exact way it happened. It was either just before or just after the Bills game that they won last year. It was either just before or just after that game that they had that game against the Cowboys where the Cowboys just utterly dog walked them, just like the Eagles dog walked them earlier in the season. And it really started to open my eyes to this team is unsustainable in terms of how they win. Because what were the Minnesota Vikings last season bars in 1 possession games? 11-0. 13 of their 11 wins came down to 1 possession. And they got really lucky. They're 0-2 in 1 possession games right now. It's honestly funny, Bars, because I look at the Giants. I think there's a good amount of comparables between the Giants and the Vikings right now. You have a quarterback that, I'll say this for Daniel Jones, he's trying out there. He's trying. Same with Kirk Cousins. He's trying out there. Kirk Cousins has actually done a pretty good job statistically over the first 2 weeks. But you have an offensive line in both those teams that is completely underperforming. Both those sides. Again, sans Andrew Thomas on the New York Giants. But then with the Minnesota Vikings, that entire offensive line, there are some highly paid guys on that offensive line. Brian O'Neill, the right tackle, who just got paid a couple seasons ago. Garrett Bradbury, who's on the interior, has always been referred to as a pretty good, one of the better interior offensive linemen. Christian Darrisaw, who is a guy who we covered a little bit in one of the first mocks that we ever were a part of with podcasting. We know the guys on this offensive line, and it's a lot of underperforming. Like you said, the skill position group when it comes to the wide receivers and the tight end with TJ Hawkinson, guys who have either gotten paid or Justin Jefferson is about to get paid. There's talent there, but it's the defense and the running game that has failed this team. I said this about the Vikings the entire time during the offseason. Was their defense last season great? No. Was it good? Sometimes. But when you lose, I think 5 or 6 starters to a defense that already wasn't perceived to be that good, you're gonna regress. I think that's the thing. People were like, the defense wasn't that great. You get rid of some of those guys, you're gonna get better. Not if you don't replace them properly. Like Patrick Peterson, gone from that defense. Kendricks.
They kill for Patrick Peterson right now. Honestly, that's the funny part.
Kendricks, the linebacker, gone. What's his name? Zadarius Smith, gone from that team. Dalvin Tomlinson, gone from that team. He's doing great in Cleveland right now, by the way. And then on the offensive side, Dalvin Cook, gone. It was really weird that they made a no Dalvins policy on the Minnesota Vikings. I don't know why they did that, but they did. And you see what happens when you get rid of talent and you don't have suitable replacements. There's going to be heavy regression. And look, I know some people are going to try to say, well, but if you look at the schedule, Week 2 against the Eagles, they did play them closer than last year. How the heck did you lose to the Bucs in Week 1? The Bucs were a team everyone primed to pick. They're going to sell off pieces at the deadline. They're going to be competing for a top 5 pick this year in what is a 2 quarterback class that we know for sure. Maybe becomes a 3 or 4 quarterback class, as we know it always becomes at the end of the goddamn season because of the media hype. But like, this was not supposed to be a good team coming into the season, and you lost to them in pretty heartbreaking fashion. Very Chargers/old Minnesota-esque. At the end of the day, like you said, Bars, I normally try to stay away from the hyperbole, but 0-3 is an extremely difficult hole to fall into. And if either of these teams will fall into that hole, I very much would be willing to say that the season is close to over. I will say this in regards to the Vikings group of people compared to the Chargers. This is only the second season for Kevin O'Donnell, the Vikings head coach. Mm-hmm. And this is only year maybe 3 or 4 of the GM. They have a lot less time spent there and wasted compared to the Los Angeles Chargers. So for people thinking, so in case anyone is trying to poke holes into why am I saying this about the Chargers versus the Vikings, there's a lot less time put into the Vikings power structure compared to the Chargers power structure. So just want to make that like separation of things there. But yeah, no, this is the biggest game of the season right now for both of these teams. And a loss here for either club, especially for the Chargers in the AFC, with what that conference is looking like. Oh my God!
To be honest, I agree with you, but I think the Vikings and the NFC, their division alone, I think if they lose this game, it's over for them because you got Packers and Lions, they ain't going nowhere. It looks like Packers might be lucky with Jordan Love again. It looks like, who knows?
We'll see.
3 touchdowns in 2 games. I don't know, man. We'll see, but. Either way, Lions are looking like the darling everyone thought they were going to be, and they're looking great. You know me, I was a Lions fan. I was hoping it was going to work out, so I'm always a fan of teams like that. But if Vikings go 0-3, and then you got a couple of division games coming on, I just don't see how the Vikings go. Even you might miss both your wild card picks if the Vikings lose this game and the Giants.
Well, no, I didn't pick them. They were my outside looking in.
Yeah, outside looking in the pod. Well, they're definitely outside. That's for certain right now. They are outside without a doubt. But I mean, other than that, there's nothing else I can add to this. Just keep an eye on this game. I think this game should have been the night game, either tonight or tomorrow night. But this game definitely, I think the NFL should start adding in a rule. They can start flexing games. Like, you know, they look at something and it's just like, dude, this is too juicy. At least a week in advance or 2 weeks, something like that.
The second that, because I forget whose game was, the Vikings were the Thursday night game last week. So the second the Chargers lost to the Titans, the NFL should have tried to call up the networks and be like, hey, can we do a little bit of work here? Can we try to work this out?
I don't know how those contracts work out, but they got to figure something out. It's everyone.
I'll say this. It's highly overly complex, and it's not that simple, especially if it's different networks. But this should have been one of the cases where the NFL tried, because you're telling me Sunday Night Football, Justin Herbert and Kirk Cousins slinging it for their seasons on the line, because even though they just traded for Cam Akers, let's be real here, the Vikings don't really have a rushing offense, and Austin Eckler, I think, is projected to miss this game, so the Chargers basically have no rushing offense. Like, Kirk Cousins and Justin Herbert might combine for like nearly 100 passes in this game, because what running game does either team have here?
None at the moment, literally, with Eckler out, and then I was never feeling good with Madison going into the season. People said, even from a fantasy perspective, people were saying that it was going to equal up just because of the opportunities, the quantity. You know, he'd at least get somewhere close to 2,000, because in previous years he was a suitable, not great, but, you know, it worked out substitute. I knew throwing him into the full-time role just wasn't going to work out. He was one of those guys where he's a backup. Yeah. He's good. He can have some great games, a handful of them, but you give him the whole season, it's not going to work out.
It's that, like, the cannibalization of running backs that the media has helped cause in the current game of the NFL has helped cause, like, let Minnesota be the telltale sign of, like, not every backup running back can step in for the starter. It's just the case. It's a similar thing in hockey, funny enough, where it's like when a backup goalie goes on a hot streak, yeah, give that backup 60 starts the next season. I'm telling you, it's not going to end well. It's so many cases where this kind of stuff happens. Like the Nick Foles thing, backup quarterback has a stretch of games, caught everyone out of surprise, wins the Super Bowl, gets traded to Jacksonville, gets paid. I know he got injured, but let's be real here. If he started the whole season, the Jaguars were not going to be a playoff.
They weren't going anywhere. They weren't going anywhere with Foles. But aside from that, you're telling me you wouldn't want to watch Steelers at Vegas for tonight's game over, this juicy fraud off we got going on?
I mean, look, I've fired like about 3 or 4 people already on the show. Matt Canada is that's a guy that's getting fired at the end of the season. Like the Steelers need to make an exception to the whole we don't fire coaches thing. Dude, Matt Canada's bad. He's just a bad offensive coordinator.
Yeah, dude. There was a lot of expectations for the Steelers. I'll admit, I was part of them, man. I didn't see it coming. Real quick, let's just go through the game. I don't think there's really any high expectations here. Who you got winning tonight's game?
I'm going to give an edge to the Chargers because if there's a defense that you expect to make a stop versus the other one, it would be the Chargers defense against the Vikings. But I'm also expecting kind of the fact of whoever might get the ball last here wins. And I think that's probably going to be the Chargers. And for Justin Herbert, I think this would be big if he just engineers a game-winning drive for this team potentially. Because I'm assuming it's going to be close. I don't see a reason why either team should win by a wide margin in this one.
So I was told by a wise man who gambles a lot, whenever you got a good game that two teams are almost very similar, where it seems like they are just about here, you always go with the better quarterback. So I agree with you. I'm going Justin Herbert. Not that I'm not a Kirk Cochains fan, just Herbert's worlds of talent better than Kirk Cousins. So if it is a close game, and like you said, Chargers up with the ball in their hands at the end, give me Herbert all day. If Kirk ends up with the ball in his hands, it ain't looking good for the Chargers.
Asante Samuel Jr. and Derwin James are out there, baby.
Yeah, but I mean, you got Brandon Staley coaching, and that's where it's All right, so let's. There's a few other 0-2 teams here. Real quick, just brush through those games. You got Houston at Jacksonville. You got Denver over here at Miami. Houston and Denver are the 0-2 teams. You got New England at New York versus the Jets. You got Carolina. No one really cares because they're Carolina. You got Chicago at Chiefs, and then you got Arizona at Cowboys at Arizona. So realistically, out of all those 0-2 teams, I expect all of them to lose. But the two 0-2 teams I wanted to bring up is, actually, I expect one of them to win, and that's New England. The two I wanted to bring up was New England and Denver. I think Denver's going to lose. I think it was all media hype. I think Sean Payton knew immediately going into the season how bad this team was, how bad Russell Wilson was, which is why he kind of berated Nathaniel Hackett right when the season started, because he wanted people to know he was already throwing in an excuse like, hey, this guy coached this team so bad that this team completely sucks, so expect nothing at all. That's really what it sounded like. If you really look back at it now and we see how bad this team is, that's essentially what he was doing. Yeah. He's just cutting off all ties, because why else would you break that coach's honor thing and go against another coach, It's just odd. And other than that, the Patriots at New York, I think Patriots need to win this one bad, just like Chargers in Minnesota. They are 0-2. I'm pretty sure they have one division loss, or am I wrong with that?
Yeah, one division loss because they lost.
One division loss to Miami. So if you got two division losses and you're 0-3 in this division as well, because I mean the only team that you can point at and say you have a chance against is really the Jets. If you lose one of these games to the Jets,
it's over.
That's your season right there. You might as well tank for Caleb Williams or something. I don't know what they got to do. Everyone kind of knew that this Patriots team wasn't going to really do much, if anything, even with the offensive coordinator changes and whatnot. Bill's just trying to get to that number one spot. It's going to take a couple years, and if they don't get some talent, he might not ever reach it.
Right. Yeah, it's rough. I'm with you. Between the two of them, the Patriots one is definitely more winnable. But I do have the two AFC East teams coming out in both matchups here. Let me just say real quick, prayers up to Patrick Surtain Jr., the amount of running he's going to have to do, whether it's Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle out there.
That man is out, actually.
Oh,
is the only chance they got. I believe he's out.
So Tyreek Hill, Surtain might lose like 3 pounds of water weight in this game if he had any more to lose there in that case. But I just think the Dolphins have looked so overwhelming at the start of this season. Even in the Patriots game, even though they didn't score a lot of points, like you could tell they were able to dissect the Patriots on a couple drives. Even though Christian Gonzalez did a very good job, which thanks NFL for letting Bill Belichick get a number one corner. Like the Dolphins still have done their thing, and Tua is undefeated against Bill Belichick. Weird that that's finally the quarterback that has Bill's number, but I always said Tua was pretty good. But I definitely have the Dolphins winning against Denver with a comfortable margin. Like you said, Bars, I think the Broncos, when you really start to peel things away, and the injuries that they had in the preseason to the wide receiving core was just absolutely killer. to them. Both Hamler and Tim Patrick lost for the season, if I'm not mistaken, which is just brutal for both of those guys. You feel for them who they've both suffered with season-ending injuries before. It's just something they don't deserve. But at the end of the day, it's sometimes the unfortunateness, the football gods for some reason don't smite Russell Wilson, so they just smite his teammates instead. I guess that's the plus side for calling yourself Mr. Unlimited.
Mr. Unlimited.
Yeah, that's another fraud there, but but yeah, I think the Dolphins win that one. In terms of the Patriots-Jets, it's definitely closer than the other game. And I definitely see a world where the Patriots do win, but I think the Jets are a little bit due to beat them because I think they've lost to the Patriots, 14 times in a row?
14 straight, I think. Yeah.
So in one of these games, they have to be due. And I think for Zach Wilson, if this isn't the confidence booster game, when is it going to be? Because the Jets were already going to have a tough schedule with Aaron Rodgers there. And we already thought it was going to be tough for them to start the season with Aaron Rodgers there. Now it's Zach Wilson. The Jets believe that they might have a shot to be a bit more competitive than what some people are giving them credit for now. If that is going to be the case, you got to win this game. You got to get the victory here. And I know the conditions aren't going to be perfect. It's been raining all the livelong damn day in the Northeast over the last 24 hours plus. But this is one of those games where by hook or by crook, no matter the weather, you got to get the victory here. So I'm going to give the Jets the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to give them a slight victory here over the Patriots. It's not going to be by a wide margin, but this is one of those games where you have to win it for yourself to save your season. I know they're 1-1. I know they're not one of the 0-2s, but it kind of feels like you're 0-2 because you lost Raj, and you got to get this victory.
I mean, in all honesty, from my perspective, I know my Jets fans are going to hate me, but anything you get this season is gravy. You're not competing. The moment Rodgers went down, all those championships, everyone knows they're gone. Yeah. Anything you get out of the season is just gravy. You just want to look competitive, so that way it looks like when Rodgers steps in, all cylinders launch, because then you don't need that, getting accustomed to each other moments you needed. Yeah, you're going to have that moment with the quarterback, but I think that's going to be a little easier to figure out than the defense and offensive line and all those other issues they had congealing all while the quarterback situation was going on. Man, just Patriots, they lose this game, it's bad, man. I don't know what they could even look forward to the rest of the season. You got to question what's Bill going to look at this, because he's thinking in the back of his head, this season's out, it's a wash. Just one last thing about the Broncos-Dolphins. How did you expect this Broncos season to go? Did you expect us to be sitting here at 0-2 with Sean Payton at the helm? Or did you see, in my opinion, I saw this team as a fraud going into it as well. So did you see it that way, or you figured they might compete here and there? You knew, in my opinion, it wasn't going to work out once Russell Wilson, and you found out the office with the coaches and Peyton's basically shutting him down and whatnot. It just didn't look like it was going to be pretty. So I kind of had these expectations. What were yours going into the season?
I thought at best they were just going to be better than the Raiders, which isn't a high bar to clear at all. I just didn't think that there was enough there for Sean Payton to be able to get this team over that much of a hump compared to last season. I expect that, I'll say this, they should have won that Commanders game. No excuse for them losing it. And by the way, I think CBS Sports shared it. I think that was the 8th or the 9th game in a row where the Broncos held the lead and they blew it. You talk about just
it's AFC West.
Except the Chiefs, there's something there, I guess. But I didn't have high expectations of them. My only thought was, can Sean Payton make Russell Wilson look a little bit like he did in Seattle? And now that we've seen the fact that I don't think that's the case anymore, because I don't think Russell Wilson can just ever get back the mobility he had when he was a Seahawk in his prime. No. The only thing left to make it work is if Sean Payton can help he's a fine, good passer. The thing with Russ is that he always relied on the ability to scramble out the pocket to help make plays. Now for the rest of the season, can Sean Payton make Russell Wilson closer to a pocket passer, straight up? And that's, I think, going to be the big question of it, because look, at the end of the day, the Broncos already paid the dude. It would be the most expensive dead cap hit, I think, in NFL history if they chose after this season to get rid of him. And he's probably one of the few guys that have this high of a dead cap hit that you're actually thinking to yourself, you kind of have to get rid of it. It's utterly insane to think about it. But if you're asking what my expectations were, I didn't call them a fraud, because to me, I think to be a fraud, you had to have had a season or two of being good for me to give you that status. So they were terrible last season. Yeah. It was easy. Like, so I'm not calling the Broncos a fraud. Like the Vikings, fraud 13 and 14 last year. The Titans, frauds, always frauds. Russell Wilson, fraud, very much a fraud. But so the team as a whole, I didn't really view it as fraud. I viewed it as a team that barely had any assets to make the roster better last season, tight to the cap, didn't have a lot of draft capital. They traded the freaking first round pick they got in the Dolphins trade for Sean Payton's coaching rights, which, yeah, that always works.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the logic there was. Thanks, Elway.
Yeah, well, it's funny. People keep saying that he's not even the GM anymore. That's the best part.
He's like part owner now. It's even worse.
So, to me, at the end of the day, if you're the Broncos, just hope stuff goes right at this point. That's all you can do. You just got to hope that you have less heartbreak than what you've already had to start the season.
So, do you by chance know how long Sean Payton's contract was when they traded and re-signed him or whatever?
So I want to say if I had to guess, I would say 5 years.
5 years? All right. So I looked up what's his name, Russell Wilson's contract really quick, and now I just exited it out. So let's back up real quick. There we go. All righty. So I looked up his contract. They have a potential out in 2026. It's going to be a $31 million dead cap hit. That's going to hurt, but it's better than essentially what would be a 85 dead mil cap next year, 107 this year if they decide to do the math, and then 49.6 in 2025. So I'm getting an eerie feeling that they're just going to sit with Russell and
they're stuck. They're straight up stuck.
They're just going to wait till 2026. You're just going to build for the future, and he's just going to hold it down. So you're not an embarrassment of the team, but you're going to be an embarrassment of the team because you said hopefully he could be a pocket passer. Even when Russell was in his prime, like even a little after his prime, he fell off a cliff because he played through all these injuries 100%. Took out his mobility. He should have never done that, but we loved it. He was Mr. November. But other than that, I don't think he could be a pocket passer because people forget Russell Wilson isn't that tall. He made his money by being able to find those passing lanes between the linemen and his mobility. So it's just not going to look pretty for Denver, especially because their line isn't up to par. I mean, it's not the worst line in the league, but it's certainly
not great.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not great for a statue of Russell Wilson. So, I mean, I think they're just going to build for the future here. And when 2026 comes, they eat that 31 mil dead cap, and you figure it out from there. Because who wants 38, 39, and 40-year-old Russell Wilson at a 58 cap hit, 53 cap hit, and a 54 cap hit?
Yeah, it's going to be like this is one of those things where it's like, this offseason could be a test of the tried and true thing I've been saying for a while now of the salary cap as a social construct in the NFL, because I don't know how the Broncos would be able to move on from this. Obviously, it would involve contract renegotiation, and it would involve like working things out with the team. Like Denver, even if they could somehow, some way trade Russ this upcoming offseason, they would still have to pay out a little bit of that deal. And look, I know teams are good. Like I know we always think to ourselves, hey, teams are desperate. They think like some teams will think they're a quarterback away. You show me one team that thinks they're a quarterback away that thinks Russell Wilson would be the quarterback.
I was about to say, I think they're a Russell Wilson away. Not a quarterback away, just a Russell Wilson away. I don't think there's a single team there that – even the Jets, let's say take the money out. If you ask the Jets, hey, would you take Russell Wilson right now for whatever deal? I think they say we're good. I think they say we'll figure it out with Zach or we'll call Colt McCoy, but I'm good.
I think they'll say, yeah, we'll wait for Aaron Rodgers next season. Like the Jets would be more than willing to give it a year and see. Even the freaking Arizona Cardinals would be like, nah.
They traded for Josh Dobbs.
Who's playing really weirdly good, at least he did in the Giants game. But the Cardinals have two options. It's either, hey, we can work things out with Kyler, or we get a new quarterback this year. There is not. I can't think of a team. Houston is more than willing to give CJ Stroud the opportunity. Chicago maybe? Like that's the only team because I think they're going to trade Justin Fields at the end of the season. Personally,
what is Chicago playing?
But Chicago has 2 first-round picks. They're going to be in line for a young quarterback. Like Denver is stuck with it. Basically, they're just stuck with it. I'll say this to my point about the pocket passing thing, Bars. The only reason I say that is because I don't know him personally when I say this, but I know Sean Payton. And what is one thing that Sean Payton anyone that's seen a press conference of him, that's heard him talk, what can you say about him? Most coaches, really. Ego. Sean Payton has an ego. I would bet you the fact that he believes he can convert Russell Wilson. I think he thinks he could do it. I really think he believes he can do it. I think because to me, like coaches always think that they know the way to overcome everything. Mm-hmm. I think a part of Sean Payton thinks it could work out with Russ, and he wants to be the guy to make that fix. He wants to be the guy that, fixed the quarterback that Pete Carroll gave up on and that Nathaniel Hackett couldn't figure out anything to do with. He wants the praise leaped upon him that he saved Russell Wilson's back nine of his career. The problem is that I don't think any coach could do that.
I think he might have felt that way prior to the season when he first joined the Broncos, but I think as the season's going, he's realizing a little bit, I've been a little more than I could chew off. But, eerily similar, now that you mentioned it, to, Drew Brees. Drew Brees got the cut from San Diego. He ended up where? Not even, ended up Miami, then got cut from there, ended up in the Saints, and that's where Peyton.
No. I don't think he ever got to Miami.
Because he was supposed to go to Miami or something like that.
I think it was, who was it? It was between Drew Brees and I think Dante Culpepper.
Yeah, there you go.
And they went with Dante Culpepper, and then they just let the Saints get him. And it was a pretty, Drew Brees' first contract with them was, back then it may have been decent quarterback money, but it was only 5 or 6 years for $60 million total.
I think he was signed to compete. He almost could have been a backup. I'm pretty sure he didn't have the job when he signed. No, either way.
I think he had the job, but I think a big thing was it just wasn't a lot of money. I will say this, for that contract and every single one after it, there was the whole little no motorcycle riding clause. They put it in his goddamn contract. It's yeah, dude, don't go on a motorbike. That's why for the NBA world, how last season Chet Holmgren got hurt, I literally said it would not surprise me if for future contracts now teams are going to try to put into these rookies contracts of, hey, don't do this random circuit stuff. Can you keep yourself healthy for us, please? Because OKC was pissed that Chet was hurt for the whole goddamn season.
Oh yeah, for sure, without a doubt, of course.
It's a similar thing, and we see this happen all the time in contracts. That's why what's his name, Randy Gregory, he had the deal with Dallas, and then he balked on it and he went to Denver because Jerry Jones tried to put a clause in his contract that had to do with basically staying out of trouble.
Yeah.
And Randy Gregory was yeah, nah. He just went
or what's it called? Arizona, when they signed a big contract with Kyler, they said you can't play
Call of Duty
too much COD. Yeah, we're limiting you to 6 hours of COD, and they actually checked. I heard they checked his game logs, which is insane. But other than that, let's talk the last 2 Monday night games here, Jer. I completely lost my schedule, but it's the Tampa Bay versus the Eagles, and the second one is the Bengals versus
the Rams.
The Rams. Thank you. There you go.
Two very big
games right here. Former Super Bowl matchup. I didn't even realize that. Super excited for the Bengals game because I think it's the Bengals game season right there. It's if they don't win this, especially with Joe Burrow's injury too, and I think T. Higgins is back in. Someone's hurt.
Yeah, I think he played one of the games. Yeah.
All right. Well, either way, it doesn't matter. So big game. Big game. What are your expectations? Who do you expect to win? I think the Bengals lose it, man. I think their season is. But let me say this right now. I think they lose it. I think they go 0-3. It'll be tough for them to get out the hole, but if there is a team to do it, I think Bengals are one of those teams. At the end of the season, they're going to be in the playoffs. Not as high as they want to be, but they'll be in the playoffs, and we're going to go. They're a sleeper. Look out for the Bengals.
Yeah. So people might say that I'm saying this with hindsight 2020, but I would say no because I said this before the first games were played. They should have sat Joe Burrow from before that Browns game. And now you're in a situation where it's a relatively tough matchup now because the Rams look better than what we expected going into the season. Puka Nacua is an absolute stud at wide receiver. We talk about Jordan Addison and Zay Flowers. Puka Nacua is looking great. Another gem there for the late drafting of the Rams. But
he threw out well too.
Yeah, I think ultimately, I always say I'm a man of conviction, and I'm going to stick with the picks that I've made. So I picked the Bengals on my other podcast for this, so I'm going to stick with the Bengals pick. Like you said, the season's on the line, and even though they came back from an 0-2 start last season, I don't know if they can because you were talking about. I forget what team. I think it was with the Patriots. You were saying how going 0-3 to start the season, but 0-2 in division is tough. That's what the Bengals are facing because their first 2 games were division games. They lost to the Browns, when it looked like they were going to be good this season, now to be decided, and they lost to the Baltimore Ravens last week. This is kind of the season right here. And for the Bengals, it's especially tough because this was kind of like not to the same credence of like other teams that we've said this about, especially the team that we made a whole dang docuseries about. But this was kind of perceived to be the last dance for this Bengals team because T. Higgins is a free agent. He's probably going to be gone because they got to pay Jamar Chase, and they did just pay Joe. And Jonah Williams, the one-time left tackle who's now right tackle, he's going to be gone because he wants to play left tackle in this league. And Orlando Brown Jr. came in the offseason. While Orlando Brown Jr. is a very good left tackle, Jonah Williams wants to be the guy on an offensive line, and he's going to leave in free agency, bar none. So I think with all this happening, if you're the Bengals, just what a unfortunate set of circumstances that you had to have where Joe gets the calf injury. Thank God it wasn't anything more, by the way, because that was the fear at first. But like, you ultimately you got to win this game if you're Cincy. And I think the most important thing, Bars, we haven't even discussed it. They're wearing the white Bengal unis. You cannot lose in those uniforms. When you have that drip, when you have the white helmet with the claw marks, basically, when you got those white jerseys, you cannot lose that game if you're Cincinnati. Do not lose that game, Cincinnati. The drip is with you. Win.
I hate white-off jerseys. Let me tell you, I hate them. It's just
I think the Bengals make it look good.
Bengals don't look bad, but like it's just every team is doing it, and it doesn't look great. It doesn't look great on every team. I'll admit that. Bengals do look good. I'll give you that. I think the Browns tried doing white out, and it wasn't great there. That's kind of what upsetted me. I think when I saw the Browns white out, I was like, this is godful. But with all that said, man, I agree with you. I would have sat down Joe Burrow for a couple of weeks just because when you hear a calf injury, I always think back to when Kevin Durant was in that finals with the Warriors. He had a calf injury, and then the calf injury turned to an Achilles tear, Same thing, sorry, Jets fans, you look at Rodgers. Rodgers had a calf injury in the preseason. People forget that. It was a calf strain or something, and cramp, doesn't matter, but something related to his calf. And now look at him before it snaps in. So you're right. This kind of is a last dance, but at the same time, I could see Joe Mixon going, and they try and figure out a way to keep Chase and Higgins just because I think all three of them connect, and they feel like there might be a way that they know that's the trio right there. That's a trio that if you can figure out a way to make those three stay, you'll be just contenders for I don't know how for long, but like just as long as those contracts go, what team can stop that duo and that quarterback?
No,
You're calling it two number ones essentially. So hopefully they do figure out the contract. It's hard, but I think they got to make it happen.
Especially because like T. Higgins, like if we're talking about what this next NFL free agency market could look like, again, we'd have to like dive deep into like whose contracts are coming up. But T. Higgins he might be the top receiver on the market, maybe second at worst.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Someone's going to pay T. Higgins money, and it is all about like can the Bengals, and I know I just said it's a social construct. Can the Bengals social construct the cap in a way where they're able to keep Higgins with knowing that they're going to have to pay Jamar, and Jamar's going to have to get paid because who's going to get paid before Jamar Jefferson? Jesus, I confused their names there. Who's going to get paid before Jamar Chase? His friend, Justin Chase. No, Justin Jefferson, obviously.
Yeah.
But so Jets is going to get paid this next offseason. Jamar Chase is going to get paid either later that offseason or the one after that. So and honestly, it kind of behooves the Bengals to figure this out because the second Justin Jefferson gets paid, the next 2 to 3 guys are going to want to get theirs, and you want to pay Jamar Chase before the next 2 to 3 guys get theirs. So it's one of those intriguing things that you have to look forward to. And I will say, like, I kind of gave it an oversight because, like, I think it's going to happen no matter what. Like, Joe Mixon's going to get cut by the Bengals.
Especially with next year's running back pool, too. It's so convoluted if you think about it. Josh Jacobs is back in there. JT is back in there. Saquon's in there. Yep. I just named 3 of the top running backs in the league, and they're all going to be free agents next year. So running backs are, once again, going to get hold next offseason. But I think they could easily replace Joe Mixon because Joe Mixon doesn't look like Joe Mixon of old anyway. So you get any wide receiver, any running back, especially one who's tough and could actually catch the ball better than Joe Mixon can. I think you got and Austin Eckler. Throw Austin Eckler on the damn Bengals. So that's not going to happen because he wants to get paid. But he's a free agent as well. Look at that. 4 of the top running backs in the league. It's just insane. And I don't see how Joe Burrow's going to have a hell of a game. That's the only way I see them winning this game, Jerk. I can't see how. I think that the Rams are just going to – their offense has looked way better than anyone's expected. I think they have the better defense out of the two teams here. I think the Rams figure it out, but if Joe Burrow ends up pulling out, winning this game, good for Bengals. I don't really got any comments on the Eagles Buccaneers game. That's kind of, I feel like, just very straightforward. I got the Eagles winning. I think it might be a close game because the two teams are kind of similar, but Eagles do got the better overall roster. They got the better defense. That pass rush is just unbeatable. And I think once you start getting some pressure in Baker's face, he's going to start looking more like Baker of old. But Baker has looked great the last 2 weeks. He's looking like old Baker, like rookie year Baker, which was the best Baker we've seen. So, I mean, maybe the Bucs are more of a not contender, but at least playoff contender than people thought going into the season. But they're a fun team to watch. I will admit that.
Yeah, more than what we thought. And the NFC South as a whole, like you look at the fact that the Saints, the Bucs, and the Falcons have all started 2-0. The Falcons and Bucs were two teams talking about maybe in the Caleb Williams, Drake May sweepstakes coming into the season. Because let's be real here, it's not a lot there, and especially with Tampa Bay, when there's the idea that Mike Evans' contract is not extended, so he's not going to extend during the season. Chris Godwin could be traded. Devin White was very vocal throughout the preseason that he wanted to no longer be on that team. And some other pieces on the squad, just slowly, not being there. Like Levante David probably going to retire within the next year or two, probably after this current contract ends. Tampa Bay was
great guy, great
linebacker, but his career is slowly coming to an end. And then on the Atlanta side of things, you got the young skill position talent there: Kyle Pitts, Drake London, now Bijan Robinson, and Tyler Algier as a really good 1-2 punch with the running backs. The NFC South has surprised us. I think the big thing for me, Bars, when it comes to the Buccaneers start, confidence. With Baker, when Baker has the confidence, both for himself and then from his coaching staff, Baker plays great. And I think we're seeing a Todd Bowles, who, let's be real here, if we gave top 3 coaches that we were expecting to be fired at the end of the season before this year started, nearly everyone would have put Todd Bowles. Let's be real about that. And I think Todd Bowles has given Baker the full reins of things to work with the offensive coordinator and the QB coach and be like, yeah, you guys figure this out. He put the full trust of everything in Baker. And have the numbers been eye-popping? Not really. But they've been good enough. Unlike what happened in Carolina and what happened at the end of the Cleveland tenure, is that Baker is not throwing his team out of the game early on, which was a problem that was happening as with those two previous stops there, where you kind of saw that get mitigated a bit with Sean McVay and LA. Now, granted, it was a lost season, but you kind of saw Baker start to get his way back a little bit under the Rams. And I think that's just continuing here, where they're just giving him the full confidence of, hey, you do you, let's run this thing. And it's going pretty good, all intensive purposes, when it comes to the Buccaneers. And I'm with you. I think the Eagles are going to win this game, but I could very much see this being a relatively entertaining game, 35-24 in favor of the Eagles. The Eagles are going to score no matter what, I think. But I think this Tampa Bay team, if they can have a solid performance here, even in a loss, you mentioned a playoff spot. I think, to me, the NFC South, despite the great start, I think there's still only going to be one team from the NFC South that makes the playoffs, and it's going to be the division winner. They need this confidence to ride into those games against the New Orleans Saints, who aren't looking that impressive to start the season, honestly. Which, what a surprise, because Derek Carr, fraud. And the Atlanta Falcons, who, Arthur Smith, if the Falcons beat the Lions this week, Arthur Smith is going to get a lot of praise for what he's doing with that offense. Because let's be real, Desmond Ridder hasn't been the best to start the season, but it's the skill position group, and it's timely stops by the defense, which we have not been able to say that since the season they made the Super Bowl, and then they suffered that great collapse. That, no joke, it haunted them for years. This might finally be the team that's slowly starting to purge it out of Atlanta, which good for them, honestly. Good for them. Shout out to our guy Jelani. I know he's happy.
Shout out Jelani. Man, just quick note on Atlanta. A lot of people are shocked that Tyler Algier is still having a good season. I mean, they forgot where Arthur Smith came from. He came from Tennessee, and he created that offense with Derrick Henry. So of course this was going to be a run-heavy based offense, even with Drake London at wide receiver and Kyle Pitts, which is probably why Kyle Pitts hasn't looked as great, because I'm not going to blame QB. He's just wildly misused. I think they should trade Kyle Pitts if you're really looking to take that next step as Atlanta. But hey, different show for a different time. Buccaneers, though, I 100% agree with you about the Baker thing. maybe he finally learned, like, under Sean McVay, he learned something, because he's just, since that Carolina brief stint, and that it was really the stint in LA, like you said, it was a lost season, but he was looking good. He had some weapons. I think the biggest thing here we've noticed is maybe Baker just never had the proper weapons. Yeah, in Cleveland, he had Odell, and he also had Amari for a little bit, but in all honesty, I've never been a fan of Amari Cooper. I think he's a guy who, you give him the volume, he'll put up some empty stats. But when the moment comes and you need to throw up a ball and hope someone can get it, Amari Cooper was never really that guy. Also, ankle injuries, he was always hurt. But hopefully we get something exciting here with this Bucks-Eagles game. Honestly, what are the chances, what percentage do you hold it that the Bucks might shock the world and beat the Philadelphia Eagles tomorrow night?
I would say I still very much give the Eagles a heavy favorite, but I'll say like a 25% chance maybe. I think this Buccaneers team, like, I think the defense is playing at a level higher than what we thought they were going to be with all the problems that they had, but they're surprising a lot of people. I think it starts with the defensive backs being good, with Carlton Davis and Antoine Winfield Jr. The linebacking duo is still there. Sans, Devin White want to be traded. Him and Levante David are still there. And then you look at even the front four. I know he missed last week. I don't know if he's going to play this game, but Kalijah Cansey, I think when he's back in the fold, I think is going to be really good. I loved him coming out the draft personally. And they still have Vita Vea there. Like that
guy.
The dude's he could bench press both of us at the same time. Like, he's that much of a monster. So, like, this Tampa Bay defense is very underrated. I think it could be a close first half, and the Eagles pull away a little bit in the second half, I think, is what would happen. So I would give the Buccaneers a fair 20-25% shot, maybe closer to 20, but I think they deserve to be in the conversation for this game. They have been one of these surprises to start the season 2 games in.
Hey, man, NFL dropped the ball here. It sounds like we got 2 great games tonight, 1 whack game. 2 great games tomorrow night, 1 whack game tonight, but it is what it is. I'll be tuning in, Jerk. Speaking of, looks like kickoff happened 12 minutes ago, so let's let the fans go and enjoy it. Any final words you got, bud?
Not really. Just, I think so far the first 2 weeks, I think we've seen a lot of surprising results. And I think that has allowed the discourse to be as unique as it is. I feel like we're talking about a lot of teams through the first 2 weeks here, Bars, that we have not really been able to talk about in seasons past. And I don't think we expected to talk about here early on. NFC South, raise your hands. I think this will continue still for another 2 to 3 weeks, where we're slowly going to start to weed out who's the legitimate teams, who are the teams that are competing for the draft, and then who all is in the middle. But I like the fact that the first, like, legitimately, not the false hope thing, and then you start out 1-3. The first month of the season, we're talking about some teams that we wouldn't have talked about last season. Like, were we really talking about the Falcons 2 games in last season? No, but now we're talking about them. Were we talking about the I'm trying to think of a team in AFC to consider here? Well, I know they're I don't think they're that great, but the Raiders are 1-1. They were 0-4 to start last season, something like that.
They'll be there soon.
They'll be there soon, but like they're technically speaking, by record, they're already better than last season in the first month. So, like, I think we need more of this in all sports, but we need more of this, like, this uniqueness in the first month of the season. We can have dialogue that we normally don't have to start the year, and I think that's just completely awesome.
I couldn't agree more, Jerg. And you know what? I think it comes down to the passing of the torch, essentially, because all those elite quarterbacks that we grew up with, they're slowly one by one going away, man. Yeah, so I think it's all this new talent. And not only that, but in sports, it's a circle of life almost. The greatest teams don't stay great teams unless they're a dynasty. And there are only 1 or 2 of those in the league that end up staying dynasties for years to come. Look at the Patriots. They lost Brady. Dynasty is finally over. The bad teams eventually, the clock is wrong twice. They figure it out once in a while. Other than that, Jared, I agree with you. We need more of this. More. Just like people need some more B&B. It was fun meeting up with you again, bud. Hopefully we can do this more often. A little rusty, a little shaky, but hey, we're back and we're going to try and get better as always. Other than that, we'll see you next week.